My family erased me for starting a business. Now they're begging me to save their perfect child. Hi, my name's Julia, and on Thanksgiving, my family looked me in the eye and called me a burden. No warning, no seat at the table, just silence. And then a sentence that shattered something inside me. You don't belong here. I packed my bags that night, but what they didn't know was every light in that house ran under my name. The water, the heat, even the roof over their heads. So I didn't scream. I just left. And slowly, one click at a time, I turned their world off. But I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because sometimes the only way to survive is to disappear from the people who pretend you don't exist. Before we begin, what time is it where you are? And have you ever felt erased by your own family? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening. It was Thanksgiving. In Boston, I carried a pecan pie hoping it might earn me a place at their table. I stepped in holding a pie I bought on the way. Pecan, store-bought, still in its plastic dome, and a small gift wrapped in plain brown paper. Nothing fancy. I'd folded it neatly, like how we used to do growing up when money was tight, but effort still mattered. Julia, my mother said with a tone that carved out my welcome before I could settle. You made it. My sister Amber was already there. Of course, her coat, long velvet trimmed, was draped perfectly across the antique hall chair. She didn't look up from her phone. She never really had to. I followed the sounds of laughter into the dining room. The table was dressed to impress. Gold-trimmed plates, tall red candles, crystal glasses. Each place had a card in calligraphy. Walter, Helen, Amber, Jack, Aunt June, Zara, even baby Leo. No, Julia. I stood there blinking. My name was missing, a deliberate omission that stung like a slap. My hands gripped the pie a little tighter as I set it down near the sideboard. No one seemed to notice. I moved toward the far end of the table, scanning again. Still, nothing. Hey, my cousin Jack snorted, glancing up from his drink. You can just stand next to me, social worker Jugelia. Isn't that what you do? I offered a tight smile. I'd spent the past year working at a community center, pulling double shifts and organizing food drives to families who'd otherwise go without. But here, that meant nothing. Dad, Walter, raised his glass. To the people who carry this family. He looked around the table, skipped right over me. Mom followed up, voice crisp. Some of us know how to give, others just take up space. The words sliced cleaner than any carving knife. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned to hold my breath in this house. Still standing, I backed toward the kitchen doorway and lingered there. Out of the way, out of sight. My presence was a shadow they refused to acknowledge. I was about to perch on the edge of a nearby chair when Amber walked over, wineglass in hand. This isn't a shelter, Julia, she said with a sweet smile. If you want charity, apply for it. Laughter bubbled from someone down the table. I didn't even know who. It didn't matter. And then Mom said it clear as glass shattering. You're a burden, Julia. Always have been. No one gasped. No one corrected her. They kept eating. I stood there still holding my coat, still in my boots, still invisible. Something in me curled up tight. I couldn't sit down. Not because there wasn't a chair, there wasn't, but because even if there had been, it wouldn't have changed the truth of that moment. They'd made room for everyone except me. So, I smiled, or tried to. I'll go put my things upstairs, I said softly. No one answered. I walked the creaky hallway up to the room I used to call mine. The door now read. Inside it looked like a catalog, neat, impersonal, cold. The twin bed was made up in gray and cream. A stack of clean towels sat folded on the dresser. No sign of me anywhere. No picture, no note, not even a spare toothbrush. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding my coat. My fingers were shaking, but I wasn't cold. I looked at the wall hook beside the door. Amber's designer coat hung there. There was no space for mine. I glanced down at the gift in my hand, the one I brought for Mom. A candle scented like pine and cloves, a small offering I hoped might rekindle her affection. I didn't unwrap it. I didn't put it under the tree. I just sat there, coat in lap, staring at nothing. They didn't just forget me, they erased me on purpose. I stayed frozen on the edge of that guest bed for a while. My heart pounded with the weight of their rejection. My hands finally moved. I stood, gathered my things, and tiptoed downstairs. The dining room was still glowing, distant laughter echoing softly. I didn't belong to that warmth, not anymore. Maybe I never did. The front door creaked as I eased it shut behind me. The cold hit hard like it had been waiting. Snow blanketed the front walk. I didn't bother brushing it off my windshield. My car wasn't warm, but at least it was mine. I drove aimlessly for a few blocks, past glowing houses, quiet streets, feeling the absence of a family that never truly claimed me. I ended up at a gas station near the interstate, the kind with blinking fluorescent lights and sad little trees for sale outside. My stomach growled, but I wasn't hungry. Still, I went inside and poured a small coffee. I needed something to hold, something to ground me. At the pump, I slid in my debit card. Declined. I tried again. Declined. Third time. Still nothing. The coffee shook in my hand as I walked back to the car and opened my banking app. The emergency family fund account, a joint account I'd set up years ago for medical bills, house repairs, and yes, holidays, was empty. Drained. $8,500, 0 cents, gone. I was still listed on the account, but someone had made a withdrawal just a few hours earlier. My name was still there, but everything else was gone. I stared at the numbers on the screen, heart pounding. Then it vibrated. An incoming text. Aunt Janice. We weren't close, not really. Her words were a sting, confirming my exclusion from their circle. But still, her message made me sit up. I didn't know you weren't in the family chat. But maybe it's best this way. Family chat. I scrolled through my messages. Nothing. I clicked over to Instagram just to check. Amber had posted a photo a few hours ago. Candlelight, champagne flutes, someone holding a pie. My pie? Buried in the comments, someone had tagged a group story. A screenshot, group chat, the real family, my parents, Amber, her boyfriend, cousins. Even Aunt Janice. Not me. I wasn't just out of the loop. I was intentionally left out. Their digital walls had shut me out as surely as their table had. I leaned back in the car seat and let my head rest against the cold window. A year ago, I'd picked up an overnight shift at a shelter, not because I needed extra cash for myself, but because Dad had a tax lien he was too proud to tell anyone about. I found the paperwork on the kitchen table during a visit. Never said a word, just found a way to help. 3 weeks later, Amber showed up with a brand new SUV. From Dad, she said, "Can you believe it?" I could. I just didn't want to. I remembered sitting across from him at breakfast, pouring his coffee while he acted like he hadn't spent a penny. I never asked. I didn't want the answer, but I had it now. They used my help, then cut me out. My fingers clenched the steering wheel. Eventually, I drove to a budget motel on the edge of town. The room was a refuge, a place to reclaim my sense of self. I dropped my bag on the bed and walked to the bathroom. The mirror was cracked in the corner. My hair was windswept, my cheeks blotchy from the cold, my eyes tired but not broken, not anymore. I could still hear Mom's voice from earlier. "You're a burden." I stared at my reflection. Then, for the first time that night, I spoke out loud. "Then, let's see how they live without the burden." I dried my hands, sat down at the edge of the bed, and pulled out my laptop. My fingers moved with quiet precision. One tab, the family fund. Another, the utilities I'd been covering at the house since Dad had his back surgery. Another, the auto payments I'd set up for Mom's prescriptions. One by one, I ended them. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I just clicked, click, click, and then I leaned back. I'd always thought helping them meant I was strong. that staying silent meant I was mature, but carrying their weight had only taught me to bend, not to stand. Well, mine just broke. I opened my laptop and for the first time I stopped paying their bills. The motel room hummed with a silence too dense for sleep. A yellow lamp flickered on the nightstand, casting soft shadows across peeling wallpaper. I sat cross-legged on the bed, the laptop warm against my thighs, a steaming gas station coffee by my side, my resolve hardening with each sip. Click. Electric gone. Click. Gas terminated. Click. Water off. Click. Internet disconnected. Each account listed me as the primary. Every monthly autopay had been my doing. Quiet, consistent, unseen. I'd been the invisible backbone of that house, that family. The unseen pillar they leaned on without thanks. I wasn't born for revenge. But I wasn't born to be used either. I leaned back, spine pressed against the cold wooden headboard, watching the cursor blink as if it held the promise of my new beginning. One more tab, the family joint savings, my name still there, balance frozen, no withdrawals allowed, no deposits either, just a silent wall between them and what used to be their lifeline. Then, on instinct, I opened another window and checked my own credit report. Just a quick scan, and there it was. A recent inquiry application for a personal loan under my name filed 3 weeks ago. Applicant contact, Amber, email address. I stared at it like it was a typo, but I knew better. She didn't even bother trying to hide it. They weren't just draining what I had. They were planning to build futures on my name. The same sister who once said, "You're not career material, Julia. You're a helper, not a doer." I laughed, but the sound never left my chest. It was nearly 3:00 IMing when my phone lit up again. Aunt Denise. That name always made my shoulders tense. Her message was a reminder of their betrayal written in careful words. Her message was short. "Your mom told the church you've been living off them for years, said they gave you everything. People donated gift cards to help your recovery." Recovery? Like I'd been ill or unstable or broken? I stared at the words, jaw slack. Then again, slower. They raised money off my name. My throat tightened and I blinked, but the motel room remained unchanged. Same flickering lamp, same crooked wall art of a sailboat in the fog. Their lies had woven a net around my name, but I was ready to cut free. My mother, who barely hugged me at graduations, who called my social work job cute, had painted me as a dependent, a charity case, and people believed her, donated, prayed, judged. I could picture it. Sunday service. Her in red, voice soft but soaked in sorrow. "She's struggling, but we're doing all we can." While I was working doubles, while I was paying her phone bill, my hands shook, not from rage, but from something older. The pain of being erased while still present. I opened my glove compartment earlier and found my old notebook, the same one I used to track client intake when the center system crashed. I pulled it from my bag now, flipped past grocery lists and scribbled, to-dos, and then I began. February 10th, Dad's tax lien payment, $4,200, 0 cents. June 15th, Amber, graduation party cake. They said they'd pay me back, $150, 0 cents. August 8th, 3rd, emergency plumbing again, $820, 0 cents. October, Wednesday's school supplies for JAC, $105, 30 cents. November, gas bills. X, 3 months, $450, 25 cents, I wrote until my wrist ached. Every dollar, every favor, every sacrifice I was told to just do because you're good at that kind of thing. I wasn't doing this to send, not yet. I was doing this to remember, because now I understood. They didn't forget what I did. They buried it, because admitting it meant seeing me. Admitting it meant acknowledging that I had held them up, not as the failed daughter, not as the burden, but as the backbone. I paused, closed the notebook gently, and stood. The heater in the room clicked off. Silence again. A silence that empowered me to reclaim my story. By sunrise, they'd feel the absence of the daughter they pretended never mattered. And by 8:00 a.m., I was sitting in a stranger's kitchen. Only, she wasn't really a stranger. Sarah was a colleague from the center. One of those rare people who don't pry or posture, just kind, steady, who saw my worth when my family called it. Her apartment in Cambridge was small but warm. Lived in. I'd barely had time to unpack my duffel bag when she placed a chipped mug in front of me. The coffee's warmth was a silent promise of support. I didn't say thank you out loud. She didn't need me to. I took the mug and stared out the window. I felt the weight of their rejection lift, replaced by a new sense of purpose. My phone vibrated once, then again, and again. Within minutes, it was a steady buzz of incoming messages, texts, Facebook pings, Instagram tags. I hesitated. The caffeine hadn't even kicked in. When I finally checked the screen, my stomach turned. Screenshots, dozens of them. A post from Walter, my father, public, complete with a Thanksgiving family photo cropped just enough to exclude me. We gave our all to our ungrateful daughter, and she walked away. Please keep our family in your prayers this Thanksgiving. I put the phone down. I didn't throw it, but my fingers itched to shatter their lies. Sarah looked up from the stove and asked gently, "Do you want me to make eggs?" I shook my head. Let them speak. Let them twist the story. Because now I had nothing left to lose. Their words couldn't hurt me anymore. Sarah brought over a plate of toast anyway. She placed it beside me and sat across the table. Her eyes scanned my face, not judging, just watching. Her gaze was a lifeline pulling me from their shadows. She hesitated, then said, "A friend of mine from church. She said something strange last night." I looked up. "They had a prayer circle, your mom, Helen. She said you'd stolen from the family fund and that you'd been unstable, that you needed help." The toast suddenly tasted like cardboard. My jaw tensed. So now I'm not just a burden, I'm unstable. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't have to. I sat in silence, staring at the faded blue paint on her wall, where my new future began to take shape. The trembling in my hands returned, small but sharp. I held the mug tighter. They weren't just deleting me. They were replacing me with a narrative, and it was working until it wasn't. By late morning, the tide started to turn. First, a comment from Mrs. Callahan, my 11th grade homeroom teacher, showed up under Walter's post. "That's odd. I remember Julia working 3 jobs to put herself through college while helping her family out. Doesn't sound ungrateful to me." Then another. "Isn't she the one who paid their mortgage a few years back?" One by one, old classmates, distant cousins, even a caseworker from my old rotation began pushing back. "She paid for their utilities during the pandemic. I remember she canceled a vacation to do it. Y'all told the church she was jobless. She's been running that center out east for years." I didn't reply to a single comment. Didn't like or heart or share. I let them talk. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the girl standing alone at the edge of the table, pie in hand, looking for a seat that never existed. I felt seen through other people's eyes, yes, but seen all the same. Then came the email from the church's assistant treasurer. Subject line, "Private inquiry, disbursements related to Helen Morris." I nearly deleted it out of habit, but something made me click. It read, "Dear Julia, I hope this note finds you well. I write in confidence due to concern. We noticed that Miss Helen Morris had requested and received over $2,500.00 in emergency donations this fall marked for medical treatment for her recovering daughter. We now understand this may not be accurate. Please let us know if you are in need of support. We're here for you." I reread the line twice. Medical treatment for her recovering daughter. I hadn't even had a cold this year. I typed slowly, "Thank you for reaching out, but I'm not the one in need anymore." And I meant it. They'd taught people to pity me. They'd crafted that role carefully, whisper by whisper, playing victim in public while bleeding me dry in private. Their deception was unraveling, and I stood firm in my truth. The coffee cup was still warm when I set it on the edge of the couch and laid my phone on top of my chest. My fingers felt stiff from the scrolling, but my heart felt lighter, freed from their chains. But the damage had already landed. Late afternoon sunlight peeked through the slats of Sarah's blinds. The light revealed a path forward, one I would walk alone, but strong. Her cat, June, purred quietly from the corner, a gentle reminder of the peace I was building. The room was peaceful, but I wasn't. I had tried to sleep, but the ache in my ribs wasn't physical. It was the last echo of their rejection, fading as I claimed my voice. I picked my phone back up. The first image that met me was a freshly uploaded post on my mother's Facebook. A holiday photo. Walter and Helen seated together on the edge of the fireplace, Amber behind them with her perfect curls and white cashmere sweater. The stockings were hung, candles glowing, every face smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong, except mine wasn't there. I remembered the moment clearly. I had been standing just to the right of the mantel, pie still in my hand, heart pounding in my chest because I realized too late there was no seat for me at the table. The photographer had asked everyone to squeeze in. I hadn't even stepped forward. Now I knew why. They'd wanted the version without me. My face hadn't just been forgotten. It had been cropped carefully, deliberately, a final act of erasure I would no longer accept. I sat upright, the cushions folding beneath me. They didn't delete me by mistake. They curated my absence. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I stared at the photo like it was a crime scene. But I was no victim. I was a survivor ready to fight. Then, stupid as it sounds, I opened my notes app and started writing a message to my mother. It wasn't angry. It wasn't anything like what I should have said. It started with, "Hi, Mom. I'm sorry if I made you feel like I disrespected the family. I never meant to." But I stopped, knowing my apology would only feed their lies. My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath caught. I didn't send it. Instead, I decided to clean up some old files, get rid of the voicemails, screenshots, storage-heavy videos I'd never watched. My cousin Rowan had sent me something on Thanksgiving that I hadn't opened yet. The file just read, "Dinner clip." I tapped it out of curiosity. The video began shakily. Rowan's phone had been propped up in a napkin holder or something on the far end of the dining table. The camera faced my parents, just behind a plate of yams and an untouched salad bowl. My mother's voice came first, sharp and unmistakable. She might be 35, but she still acts like she's 15. All that therapy. And what did it teach her? To mope laughter. My father chimed in, raising a glass. "Let's just hope she leaves before dessert. I'm not cleaning up after one of her moods again." More laughter from Amber, from her fiancé, a chorus of dismissal that fueled my resolve. None of it sounded rushed. None of it was said in anger. Their words were a knife, but I was no longer the target. The same words they must have used when I wasn't in the room. Maybe when I was a child. Maybe when I was standing just around the corner. I didn't cry. That would have been too easy. I closed the video, sat still for a long while, then walked quietly to the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked almost unfamiliar. Worn, yes, but not broken. My eyes held a fire, ignited by years of silent strength. I reached for the draft message on my phone, stared at it for a beat, then hit delete. If they wanted to pretend I was never there, fine, but I wasn't going to make it easy for them to rewrite history. I stared into my reflection. My voice cracked just once. They wanted me gone, fine, but they won't erase me without a fight. Because now I had evidence, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to be seen. The parking lot behind the county courthouse was slick with gray slush, and the wind bit through my coat as I stepped out of my car. I clutched the key to my P.O. box in one hand and my scarf tighter with the other. The cold was no match for my burning determination. The mailroom smelled faintly of ink and floor cleaner. I opened box 207 and pulled out the usual, a flyer for a payday loan place I'd never use, a local political newsletter. Then I saw the cream-colored envelope from Harbor Community Credit Union, stamped urgent. I didn't open it right there. I waited until I was seated inside my car, my hand steady, as I prepared to face their latest betrayal. Inside was a fraud alert. A loan application had been submitted under my name 3 days ago. Someone had tried to secure a $40,000 0 personal loan and listed their place of employment as Walter Property Management. I hadn't lived at that address since Thanksgiving. My name, my credit, was still being used like a family tool, just another shared utility, a resource they plundered without consent, just another thing they assumed belonged to them. I sat still, letting the words sink in. I wasn't even shocked anymore. That was the sick part. I was tired, yes, but I wasn't surprised. They weren't done feeding off me. Instead of crying, I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the notebook I kept there for court intake notes. I turned to a blank page, wrote down the date, the credit union's contact, the type of alert. Then I drove straight to the community nonprofit downtown where I sometimes helped with translation for low-end clients. Rachel, a legal assistant who worked there part-time, looked up when I walked in. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm about to file something official," I said steady. "I just need a little help making sure it's airtight." Rachel nodded. "Let's get started." We spent the next hour drafting a fraud complaint. Documented, not emotional, calm, but complete. I had the dates, the screenshots, the paper trail. This time I wasn't spiraling, I was building. Later that afternoon, after stopping to pick up groceries for Sarah as a thank you, I got a call from my landlord. I didn't recognize the number at first. "Hi, Julia," he said, polite but formal. "We've received a complaint through the Homeowners Association. Apparently there was some sort of disruption or argument on your porch last night." My heart sank. I hadn't been on the porch. I'd been inside, watching TV with Sarah and playing a word game on my phone. "There's been a mistake," I said. "Well," he hesitated. "The form had your name signed on the bottom and your unit number listed. Their attempt to taint my home only strengthened my resolve. After we hung up, I asked Sarah if anything strange had happened while I was out. She looked up from the kitchen table. "Oh, that woman in the pearl coat came by. Didn't ring the bell, just stood out front talking to a man in a red scarf. She pointed at the window once, then left." My throat went dry. "Was she blonde?" "Yeah." Amber's presence was a calculated move to undermine me. Amber, of course. They weren't just dragging my name through their house anymore. They were reaching into mine, trying to stain my record where I lived, where I rested. They wanted to ruin my name, not just my seat at their table. That night, after Sarah went to bed and the TV had long gone quiet, I opened my laptop again. But this time, I didn't go into bank accounts. I didn't pull up my credit report. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Cost of Being the Family's Silent Accountant." Line by line, I began writing. Not for a lawyer, not for the HOA, not even for the credit union. This was for me. For the girl who used to split her lunch with Amber at school. For the daughter who paid the overdue tax bill while her parents said she owed them that much. For letting her stay in the guest room. For the woman who was still being used even after she'd left. I didn't hit post, but the document sat there waiting. My cursor blinked, so did I. I was ready to tell my story. Not theirs. The morning started with light pouring through the sheer curtains in Sarah's living room. The quiet was a canvas for my new beginning. I felt the strength of my own voice rising within me, just sunlight, the faint purr of the heater, and the smell of fresh coffee already brewed. I stretched slowly, my body ready to carry my own future. But my hands didn't tremble this time when I reached for the mug Sarah had left beside my laptop. She didn't say anything as she left for her shift, her support a silent pillar I could lean on. I opened the laptop. The draft sat on the desktop like a dare. The cost of being the family's silent accountant. I reread every word, double-checked the screenshots. Bank statements showing mortgage payments in my name. Utility bills from a house I hadn't lived in for months. Receipts for repairs, groceries, credit payments, all of it. My silent ledger of what love had cost me. Above the images I typed one line, "This is what a burden looks like," and I clicked post. Then I closed the laptop and poured more coffee. I didn't pace. I didn't hover over the screen like a teenager counting likes. I let it go out into the world, the same way I used to let my paycheck go into their mortgage account without expectation, just with purpose. By midday, my phone buzzed more than it had in weeks. The first message was from an old high school classmate I hadn't spoken to since graduation. She sent a screenshot of my post. Her message read, "This needed to be said." Then came another and another. Former neighbors, old church friends, even a retired teacher, Mrs. Groves, who once helped me write my college application essay. She commented publicly, "I remember Julia working nights at the diner, then coming to school exhausted, but still helping the PTO at her parents' church. This family has a short memory." Someone else replied beneath her, "Didn't she shovel her parents' driveway every winter while they stood watching from the porch?" The comments multiplied. Screenshots spread. People who hadn't spoken up before finally did. And then Amber, her text came in like a venom-tipped thorn. "Hope you're happy embarrassing the family. Mom's crying. Dad says you've ruined Thanksgiving for everyone who ever loved you." I stared at the words, but instead of replying, I set my phone face down. Let her stew in silence just like they'd made me do for years. Around 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I cracked the door open and blinked in surprise. Pastor James stood on the landing, both hands wrapped around a glass casserole dish. He wore a long wool coat and had a look I hadn't seen on him since I was 14 and refused to get confirmed. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He didn't say anything about the post. Didn't ask for clarification or defense. He just held out the dish, a simple gesture that validated my truth. "This isn't charity," he said softly. "It's acknowledgement." I nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. And then he turned and left. His visit was a bridge to a community that saw me. When I closed the door, I stood there for a long moment, dish in hand, feeling the weight of their lies lift from my shoulders. Later that evening, Sarah returned from work, kicked off her boots, and flopped onto the armchair with a grunt. "You okay?" she asked, finally looking up at me. I met her eyes and answered without hesitation. "They can't pretend anymore. Not with all of Cambridge watching." And it was true. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the helper, the girl who kept her head down while her parents took the credit while Amber got the spotlight. But now people were reading, people were remembering, and for once my story wasn't being told about me, it was being told by me. They had tried to silence me, now they couldn't stop hearing my name. Friday faded into Saturday, like breath disappearing on glass. My voice echoed louder than their silence. I had just ended a Zoom call with Emma, our legal aid contact, when I heard it. 3 firm knocks on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Sarah was still at her sister's for the weekend. I pulled my sweater tighter around me, crossed the room and opened the door. A man in a crisp brown jacket stood on the porch. He didn't smile. "Julia Morris." I nodded. "You've been served." He handed me a thick, white envelope, nodded once more, then turned and walked down the icy steps like this was just another task on his SAD route. I stood there for a moment, fingers stiff around the edge of the envelope before finally closing the door behind me. At the kitchen table, I peeled it open with slow, deliberate fingers. Civil complaint for emotional elder abuse, defamation, abandonment filed by Walter Morris, my own father. I sat down. My hands stayed steady. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I stood up, walked to the cabinet above the desk and pulled out a file folder, labeled in black Sharpie. They forgot I was the one who paid. Inside it was everything. Utility bills with my name, credit freeze confirmation, screenshots of the fraudulent loan attempt under my name, mortgage statements for their house, payments drawn from my account, printouts of the church ledger from the treasurer showing the misuse of donation funds. And then I whispered to the empty kitchen like I was speaking to the past. You're not the only one who knows how to file papers. 4 days later, I arrived at the small courthouse on Beacon Street just before 11 o'clock a.m. Legal aid had set up a mandatory pre-mediation meeting. No cameras, no courtroom, just 2 parties, a neutral mediator, and the truth on paper. Walter was already seated when I walked in. He wore his old Sunday suit, a relic of his false authority. Helen sat beside him, draped in a gray coat that swallowed her as if hiding from the truth. They didn't look at me as I sat across the table. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with weary eyes and a calm voice, began introductions. Walter cut in before she finished. She left us. After everything we gave her, and now she's slandering our name on the internet in the church, people have turned on us. Helen sniffed sharply beside him. Her hand trembled as she dabbed beneath her eyes. She turned people against us, Walter continued, and she's let the whole town believe we abused her. We sacrificed so much for that girl. I didn't speak. I just reached into my leather folder and pulled out 3 pieces of paper. One by one, I slid them across the table. First, the mortgage receipts, my name, my bank, every month for almost 3 years. Next, the copy of the fraud alert filed under my name dated days after I left the house. Finally, the email from the church treasurer outlining donation misappropriation. I didn't look at Walter, I looked at the mediator. She read the document slowly, quietly. When she finished, she folded her hands and said, "Sir, these documents indicate potential criminal liability if pursued." The room stilled. Helen covered her mouth and began to sob. Her tears were no match for the evidence before her. Walter's face went tight. He stood abruptly, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. His exit, a surrender to the truth. The mediator didn't flinch. She waited until the silence returned. Then she turned to me and said, "You didn't just protect yourself. You exposed a system of silence." I didn't say anything back. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the folder. As I walked out of the room, I felt lighter. My steps carried the freedom of my own narrative. For the first time in my life, the facts spoke louder than their stories. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about record-keeping, and this time I had kept every receipt. 4 weeks passed like the snowmelt in early April. The world felt new, shaped by my own hands. I didn't hear from Walter or Helen again. Not directly, their silence a testament to my strength. The civil suit dropped. No settlement, just gone. Their claims collapsed under the weight of my evidence. The church, too, moved quietly. Helen was removed from anything related to donations, her role erased, just as she tried to erase me. One afternoon, I found myself walking down Charles Street, not because I meant to. I was visiting a friend nearby and took the long way home. That old house, my childhood house, looked smaller now. It held no power over me anymore. I didn't stop, just walked right past. I didn't need to peek through the window. I had seen enough. A few days later, I signed the lease to a 1-bedroom apartment just outside Somerville. Nothing fancy, but it had warmth. A home built on my own terms. The first morning in my new space, I sat on the floor, sipping coffee from a chipped mug I'd found at the thrift store. The light in my new space was mine, a beacon of my resilience. I had picked a deep green for that wall, a color that spoke of my rebirth. While unpacking my final box, Something small slipped out from an old coat pocket. It clinked softly as it landed on the floor. A crooked, glitter-covered Thanksgiving ornament shaped like a heart. My name spelled in awkward, childlike letters. I'd made it in 2nd grade. Helen had called it too messy and tucked it behind the tree that year where no one would see. I hadn't thought of it in decades. I held it in my palm. It was a symbol of my endurance, not their negligence. I set it on the shelf above my desk, not as a reminder of rejection, but as proof that I had been there, that I had always mattered, even if they never said so. That evening, I sat on the tiny balcony with Sarah. We wrapped ourselves in a shared blanket, the warmth a testament to our bond. She had brought over takeout and 2 cans of lemon soda. We didn't talk for a while, our silence a comfort not a wound. Then I said it, not for her, but for me. I thought losing them would destroy me. Sarah didn't flinch. She sipped from her can, leaned her head back, and said, "You didn't lose them, you lost who they pretended to be." I nodded. No tears came, no ache, just breath. I closed my eyes and let the night in. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It held me, and I held myself. Later that week, I opened a blank document. I titled it, "To the Ones Who Are Always Called the Problem." Maybe one day I'd share more than just bills and receipts. Maybe I'd write all of it. But for now, I wanted to say something to you. Yes, you. If you're still reading, if you're still here, sometimes the loudest betrayals happen in silence, in skipped names, in twisted stories. Sometimes the deepest wounds are dressed up as duty or tradition or family. But healing that starts the moment you choose yourself. Not in anger, not in vengeance, just in truth. The moment you stop apologizing for not shrinking. The moment you say, "I'm done paying to be tolerated." I still hear their voices sometimes, especially on holidays or when their shadows try to linger. But now mine is louder.